Hello,
Hey,
I'm Alex,
and I'm Val.
and we are here for episode 5, season 6A, Mr. and Mrs. John Sacrimoni Request.
Yes.
That's what we're doing.
We're back on our regular recording setup, I'm sure.
Yeah, we got this. We got this working. I just,
One thing that Alex is really into is sound recording stuff. And
Is it?
so, yeah, well, you do it for your music stuff.
medium.
And
I'm medium into it.
So he can hear things on podcasts that he's like, oh, there's a cut and stuff like that.
Oh, right.
And I don't know. I would never know. I could never hear those things. So I don't know if you guys hear the difference in our quality of audio production.
I heard it when I was bouncing the last one. It sounded exactly the same to me, so I don't think it made a huge difference.
All right. Well, that's good to know that we have a backup plan if ever that happens again.
It's true. My H2 recorder from when H2 recorders were a thing. They're not anymore. Oh. Really. That's okay.
But yeah, it's like almost halfway through season 6A, which is crazy.
It is crazy.
And we have a pretty big shift this episode from our first kind of 4 episodes of this season.
Mm-hmm.
We have this like different vibe. We're like exploring some, I don't know, we've taken a turn and we're going to look at something different for a second. It's kind of what it feels like, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't have, we still have Tony kind of grappling with the repercussions of him being in this coma, right? But he's grappling with them in less like a philosophical way and now in kind of a more physical way, like about his physical power. And we have a lot of focus on muscles and stuff like that, right? Like, so it's less kind of like those existential repercussions that we were dealing with a lot last episode, but it's really definitely more kind of like the physical, bodily repercussions of having a major surgery, right? And even like he grosses the guys out when he's back that first day. Yeah. Talking about like, the way the wound was, I don't know. Yeah. Whatever they did to the wound. It was wet healing or whatever. Yeah. Anyways. And like, it's like, we know at the time that he's gone through a major injury, but like, a wound, like a gunshot wound to your stomach is a pretty major surgery. Yeah. So we really, like, this episode kind of get to feel that, which we haven't really, like, they don't really emphasize it as much in the past couple episodes.
Right. Yeah, and for me, I think, like, the thing that really comes out in this episode is how people represent themselves and how people kind of put on faces to represent themselves a different way than they actually feel or maybe are as people. And there's really so many examples of that. I mean, characters I think the most important are maybe Tony, the way that he is representing himself, trying to show strength. Obviously Vito is a huge one, and we have him basically trying to represent himself one way throughout the entire course of the series, and at this point it's coming out that he has this kind of secret life. And I love the irony where he says that he says that he's sick so that he's leaving, which is false. Then he says he's going out for collections. And then we find out that actually we're at a place where people actually are going out for collections. And then we see Vito in a role that is true to himself, but he's keeping a secret from everybody else. And there's just so many examples throughout the entire episode. Like the first thing that we see is Rusty getting this invitation saying Mr. and Mrs. John Sacrimoni Request, which is actually the title of the episode. He's saying, now this shit, right? So it's like there's something that people want, and there's something that people represent, and there's something happy that people kind of engage in, but then there's another side kind of behind it, and there's just all over the place. Phil Leotardo, at the end we have him
being like,
he's an emotional man after saying like, screw this guy, I can't believe
him
just
is lowered or something. Yeah.
So for me the thing that really comes out is the representation of people and the way that people are kind of representing themselves and being seen, which is actually related for me to what you're talking about. Yeah. Because there is another dimension, like the everyday life of dealing with identity and who you are is really interesting.
And it is like, we really do see Tony grappling with this, like in his conversations with Melfi, right? Like you know, he kind of vacillates back and forth between these multiple identities that he has, right? Like we see that in characters, but we have him doing that. Like he's like, I like it when he's like, each day is a gift, and that's how it's gonna stay. Yeah. Like it's so like counter. Like it's these two parts of his identity that are kind of mashing up against each other. And I think that's the thing for these characters who have these like dual identities. Like I think Vito, like as an example, like having to do that for too long, like eventually you're kind of exposed, right? You can't, you know, you can't fool everyone. You can't be Two-Faced without one day getting burnt, right? Well, like Phil Leotardo saying, you know, saying different things to different people, right? Like it's going to come back to you. So I don't know. I think there is that like aspect of like, okay, like who are you really? Like, are you this person or are you that other person?
That example.
Like, what are your true feelings? Yeah. Because it's hard to tell, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, that example that you used, each day is a gift, that happened at the beginning of the episode when Tony is suppressing the obvious psychological impact of his uncle trying to murder him a second time. I know. And Melfi's trying to talk about that.
Melfi's like calling him out on his shit, being like, like you're a family member tried to murder you.
The same one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's suppressing it and saying each day is a gift. So again, like that also plays into like you can suppress it, but you'll eventually get burned. So Tony is now representing himself in a certain way as this, in some ways, this happy wanderer, which is interesting.
I was going to say that too. Yeah.
This thing that he...
And Melfi knows that's bullshit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The relationship between Tony and Melfi is really interesting for me in this episode because I question like what Tony is getting out of his therapy in this episode. And in particular, at the end of the episode, I feel like he's actually regressing and maybe developing some poor behavior and violent and damaging behavior from his therapy.
He's always gotten that from Melfi though. Like think about like the Sun Tzu thing and stuff like that.
There
like,
are times where that happens. Yeah.
And so like what she said to him this time about like, you know, like I forget exactly how she puts it, but that what she's talking about like showing strength even though you're hurting on the inside or whatever. He was like, yeah, I was going to say that too. Right. And then, but he takes that a different way, right? Like he takes that and it's like, oh, she's saying to me, I need to go show strength. I need to beat up this huge Jacked Italian muscle man. The hunky new Furio.
Yeah. That's actually a really fascinating scene for me too, because well, first of all, we have this episode where Tony is ostensibly becoming this new person who every day is a gift and is learning and growing from his injury and moving away from the previous mistakes of his life. But ultimately, he's actually maybe even just doubling down and becoming an even worse person. But that scene is really fascinating. And I think in the last episode, I stopped caring about color, but I'm back. I like it.
I think that was 2 episodes ago.
2 episodes. Well, now I care about color again. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
But that scene where he's talking to Melfi and Melfi is talking about being decisive, showing strength, and Tony interprets it in this specific way. It's fascinating because Tony's wearing all black and Melfi's actually wearing all black as well. And in between them, we have Kleenex, which is all white, which really stands out to me because the Kleenex represents an opportunity for Tony to actually deal with his emotions, maybe actually be human, to cry, to deal with these things, to reach out.
Like John does in that moment.
Like John does, to actually maybe like reach out. And we've talked a lot about blacks and whites, but like as the contrast to the black that he's wearing that actually has often in the past represented the affiliation with the mob. And he doesn't reach for that. He's just having this conversation with Melfi, who's wearing all black, who ultimately gives him information that reinforces his connection to the mob and violence and this lifestyle that is emotionally unsound and is also damaging in the way that it's just kind of leading him further and further down the path of being this criminal and not a reborn character like we flirted with in the last episode.
Yeah. It's interesting how that comes on the heels of him like seeing John in that emotional scenario, right? Like, and I think in a lot of ways, like empathizing with emphasizing.
That's normally my job to.
I said it so emphatically too. Empathizing with John, right, in this moment, like, because he, like, you know, we see his gaze at Meadow during this whole episode. Like, he's clearly like he is grappling with these big feelings still, right? And so he, more than anyone, probably empathizes most with John crying at the, when the feds are taking him away from his daughter's wedding, right? Like Tony can get there. The other guys can't really get there.
Yeah.
But it's interesting then that conversation, like that hearing those guys' impression of John and then having that conversation with Melfi, like really solidifies the position that he ends up taking, right? Like he had a choice there.
Yeah.
He could have kind of gone either way.
Yeah.
And he made a choice to show that brute force and like scare people into respecting him.
Totally.
Right?
Absolutely. And maybe that's the first example of him making a choice since his recovery, and that's the choice that he makes. In fact, we have him in the end looking in a mirror, and the question is, who is he? He was asking, who am I? Well, now he's seeing himself and he's happy about it. This like,
even though he's vomiting blood,
but that's what he sees, and that's what he likes, and that's what he chose.
It's a really crazy scene.
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty pivotal.
Me too.
For the season, I think it's
Me too.
It's pretty important, and it's just really masterfully done, and I really like it.
Yeah, no, it's a super powerful kind of chain of events that go on there. The whole I don't know the hunky new Furio's name even.
Doesn't matter. Hunky Furio.
I do like, just as an aside, I like how there's people that we've never seen before.
Yeah.
In this, right? Like that in this time Tony's been gone, that there's been these changes. Anyways.
Right.
I like that. But yeah, like whoever Hunky New Furio is, right? That scene with how he like picks a target, right? Like he's looking at everyone's muscles.
Yeah.
He's looking at like who can I manipulate? Right. It is manipulation in some ways, right? Because like it had to be true enough.
Yeah. He was also seeing the other thing. He was looking at muscles. He was also looking, and there was also a focus on people's tattoos.
You're right.
I think maybe has to relate to
you said that when we were watching
seniority or also like affiliation with the mob. Like this guy's fresh. Like he doesn't have these markers on him that link him to the mob.
Yeah.
Because, he sees Paulie, like everybody really, even like the other big dude who we don't really have that much experience with in film. He has this like bass clef tattoo. Yeah. But anyway.
He might, in another life, he might have been in healthcare though. That's what he says.
Maybe he would have been a bass player.
Yeah. I think there is that, but I think part of it is also like, Tony's also seen what's happening with Rusty, right? And so happening with John while John's in jail, right? Yeah. And so you also can't fuck with the people who are like the ones who are right underneath you. So he picks somebody who's not made, right? Like he doesn't want to cause trouble for himself either.
Yeah,
so
totally.
he does like
smart.
He makes a good decision there, right?
Yeah.
Like he makes an edge.
He makes a good decision. Let's define good decisions.
He makes a great decision in that scene.
Yeah.
But then going from that to the scene, like the scene from above in the bathroom, is so crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting episode too, because up until that point, Tony is dealing with this identity issue because he's being dealt with in a different way. Like Carmela's saying, "Oh, it's your first day back at work. I feel like a mummy." People are basically like feeding him. He can't
scraping onions off of.
Yeah, he can't eat onions. Like he's restricted in what he can eat, which is something that we've also often affiliated with like power and strength in the New Jersey family. Even like a focus on stature and weight, like talking to Bobby who's playing basketball, being athletic. What do you weigh? 265 now. We've seen Tony's weight in previous episodes. We know that they've reversed because in the beginning Bobby Tony was bigger. So there's a lot of kind of emasculating behavior and actions in the episode that bring attention to an identity crisis that Tony could be having at this point. Yeah, and I think like a lot of characters through the episode are just in that situation of having these crises, and it kind of picks up from what was happening in the last episode. I mean, we ended off with Paulie kind of having this huge identity crisis and making his own choice in the end when he beats up Jason Barone.
Yeah.
And
we have the same music from last episode.
Yeah, there's Three Bells comes back to Vito at the motel, which is interesting for me because that also connects Vito as another character who's kind of completing his arc, or maybe beginning his true arc in terms of there's been a development and an exercise of choice from these characters to become somebody. So Polly kind of did that. Vito has kind of done that. We're just kind of becoming privy to it at this point. But they're connected by the use of this Three Bells song that happened at the end of the last episode, and with Vito at the motel, which I thought was interesting. It's like a developing character. And the story is developing actually throughout the song. It was like the song started in one verse and continues in this episode. Yeah. Interestingly, they're actually in the motel, like Vito, when he's kissing Marie, another connection to the last episode, there's the painting on the back. It's like of water, and there's actually like kind of like leaves of a tree or foliage, greenery that's almost like moving in the wind, that connects to Tony contemplating the kind of
these like
the wind, the movement of greenery, which is connecting to the imagery and symbols that we've been talking about for the entire series. But Vito is actually now confronting his own mortality, perhaps, and his own death, and his own, crisis of identity out of necessity, because right now he is kind of being thrown into a very dangerous, real situation.
Yeah. Well, and he's, he's making a choice. Maybe to just like embrace that piece of his identity more. Maybe, like you said, like it's not really a choice. Like, seems like his home life is not great.
Yeah.
Because he's closeted, and miserable. But like nobody in that relationship is happy, right?
No.
So he's also kind of making a choice. Like, is this the life that I want?
Yeah.
Too.
And we can see it, like when he's dancing.
Like, who
with
am
Marie,
I and where am I going? Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, what is my life going to look like for the rest of my life?
Which is really becoming like a central theme of 6A. That, if anything, like that's the thing that's being applied to all the characters.
Totally. Yeah. We see it in this episode too with, I think, like Meadow and Finn, and like so like all this like wedding talk, and Allegra, Sacrimoni too, in some ways also, right? Like we see kind of people like, identifying as, I don't know, like Meadow and Finn rejecting kind of getting married and the stuff with kids, and like, feeling really uncomfortable being asked that by people, but then someone like Allegra like really embracing that part of her identity. And like doing all these traditions, right? Like the wedding is so crazy, right? Like every like kind of cliche is packed into it, right?
Yeah.
Like, so like just really embracing these traditions versus, like identifying as something different than that. Even the differences like between in the Sacrimoni family, who we've never met before, Ginny, yes, but the daughters, we see them like once before. And we see, these differences in like how they identify in their family, and talking about like, can't this family ever talk about anything but food?
Right. Which is, that's really interesting for me, because like clearly like there's these these issues that family is facing. Actually, like when we first see them in the prison, like there's a lot of smoking of cigarettes. Like it feels out of control. Yeah. There's
both
obviously
a
lot of issues in the family that are being discussed, and kind of in passing, people who don't talk to each other, the Haitian, like there's a lot under the surface. Even the relationship between them, like Allegra's fiance at that point, saying like John saying like, we're gonna get through this as a family, and then he says, sorry, like, what did you call me? And he's like, oh, thank you, Dad.
I know, that one's so funny.
Yeah, but like, these conventions. But then also the interesting thing about that is that even though the conventions are different and the people are different, like we still have this line, can we ever talk about anything other than food? Which is connected to things that we've heard from people connected to the Soprano family. Like Christopher actually said basically the exact same thing in D-Girl, talking about can't we talk about anything but food? I can't remember exactly, but I feel like it's either Meadow or AJ basically says the exact same thing.
I can't remember.
So like even these different families with these different issues and different identities are kind of arriving at some of the same issues and same manifestations through the younger generation kind of dealing with them.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. What else?
Yeah. We have...
I think I want, like, Christopher was interesting to me this episode. Maybe it's not like connected to what we're talking about exactly, but like he really, like, you can tell that he's someone who's really influenced by how people are, like, how powerful someone seemes, right? So it's the first time we kind of hear him, and at least in a while, kind of speaking out and being like, I think that's a pussy ass move, or whatever he says about like hiring a guy from Italy to come and kill Rusty, right?
Yeah.
Like,
also saying he completely agrees.
Agrees that like
that Johnny Sack is like weak right now.
And so, we're seeing that this really like this is a language that he really like. This is something that he really values and he really speaks to him. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I don't know. It was just interesting to me, and it sets up some stuff to happen this season for sure. With Christopher.
His character, like his identity, is definitely getting flushed out a little bit there. I also love the way like humor kind of comes back in this episode, because things have just been so heavy and so dark. Like, for instance, like Christopher, like those lines about like his misunderstanding of how favors work from Godfather 1.
I love that line so much. Yeah, you come to me. He's like, "Isn't that it? Like you go to him on your daughter's wedding day?" And he's like, "What?"
And he's like, "You should ask him not to do it."
Yeah. Yeah, that is good. Yeah, you should ask him not to do this.
Whoa, deep. Deep, Christopher. Well, we've talked about that. Like, humor does kind of become a part of this show, and it's something that I think kind of makes the show like kind of transcendent, because it deals with all these things, and yet there is always humor there. But sometimes you feel like it kind of gets lost at parts of the series. And this episode's interesting because we're getting away from these kind of like more abstract episodes that are dealing with these kind of major existential questions, and it's still there, but it's much more linear. We've set up like a much more traditional story arc with Vito. There are things that are happening that are less kind of experimental and dealing with philosophy.
Although this episode, like, it's, I don't know, like, there's something, it's a Steve Buscemi episode. And there is something, like, kind of, I don't know what the word is, like, about the storytelling that's interesting. So we have, like, for example, like, that first scene with Rusty getting the wedding invitation. It kind of, like, zooms in on the wedding invitation as the first shot, too, which is kind of, like, reminds me of, like, I don't know, Father of the Bride or something like it reminds me of kind of like a cheesy rom-com kind of. And they zoom in on this invitation, and then we have the like fade, and then the 6 weeks later or 6 months later,
like
whatever.
Immediately. What a strange.
And then later on, we have some other funny edits throughout it. So there is something still kind of almost dreamlike about the, I don't know, just like the way that this episode was told. The passage of time was kind of vague in some ways, but at the same time defined, like in that 6 weeks later shot. I don't know. But again, that's why I also like that we're that far along in Tony's healing. Like we kind of skip over some time, right? We're that much like these new guys, these new bulky characters showing up. Yeah. Bulky, is that?
They're pretty bulky.
I mean, maybe hulky. I don't know. Some of them are bulky. Some of them are hulky.
Right. Maybe they're both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of them could have been a nurse. He likes healthcare. He's the one who keeps getting Tony water and asking if he wants him to set a timer for his medication.
What a sweet guy.
Which is sweet.
Yeah.
Nice.
The one thing I was noticing in the episode too is like the use of these kind of like fade edits that gives it a pretty different feel from a lot of the other episodes. It's kind of like
it goes along with what I was talking about. I was saying that too. Like it is that. Yeah.
I don't know. There's like a disbelief that kind of creeps in or something, and
it's not as realistic.
It's not as realistic. Yeah. I see that a lot.
Yeah. It's interesting. The other character I found kind of interesting this episode and like discussion around him is AJ. So in the first session we have with Melfi in this episode, he's like, let's go back to what we were talking about before this happened, right? And they were discussing AJ, and he tells her about, he says the same line as Carmela. He's like, you dropped out of college and waited till I was in a coma to do it or whatever. And then he says, I wish that AJ would have taken some of my good characteristics, right? So we're kind of going back to this issue too of like, passing down these characteristics and what parts of your parents' identity become part of your identity. And we were dealing with that last episode with the philosophical things being passed down or like religious things being passed down. But here we're kind of dealing with personality. And I do like when Melfi, when they're talking about how AJ's working at Blockbuster, he said, like, she says to him, like, can we agree that there are worse ways to make money than working at Blockbuster?
And Tony does agree.
I found that interesting, right? Like, I think we really do see him making a very informed choice, or like a more, I don't know, informed is not the right word, but he's making, like, I think, like, when he first would have entered the mob, right? Like we see lots of characters, like, it kind of was not a choice, right? Like, there was lots of things that were leading him down this path, but now he's really actually, like, making a choice to, he knows what he's doing is evil and bad.
Yeah.
Well, he's seen it.
Right.
He's been in weird purgatory. I think, I think he really does, he met some monks there. I don't know, like,
you've seen the
he knows what he's doing, I think, or at least as more than he would have ever kind of recognized before.
Yeah, maybe there is like some change in that moment, and we have to kind of question where it's all leading.
Also, AJ has a new girlfriend. Speaking of new characters,
she seems great.
I think she kind of does seem great. I like her better than, what was her name, Amber? What was her name?
Devin,
of course. Devin.
Yeah.
Forgot all about her. I guess so did AJ.
I guess so. Yeah.
What else?
It's an episode where I don't have as much to say. Like, I think they're kind of just like setting up more of a traditional kind of format. It's also interesting because it kind of like plays with maybe like a kind of like dramatic soap opera-y kind of format. And it's like an episode that can feel like that, but then under the surface there is still quite a bit going on. It's also kind of like an establishing episode within the context of this season because, we're setting up some of these storylines.
Yeah.
And we're coming out of somewhere pretty heavy, and like we've talked about this during other seasons of the show, like there are times where it almost feels like there's like a trilogy of episodes or something that's linked through its connection through different things. We've talked about like a trilogy of violence.
We had some other trilogies too.
Yeah, or or duo, whatever. Like there's just kind of parts of seasons that seem to be connected in certain
like
ways.
acts. They're kind of like
and acts structurally within a season. And I feel like this episode establishes a new time outside of the first 4 episodes.
Yeah, I think we're in the second act of this season.
Yeah, I would say that too. And it's really interesting to think about what that first act was because it's unpredictable. Like I wouldn't have thought that that's how they would start the last season, but it's kind of perfect for the show. And I think we're definitely going somewhere different. And this is definitely a part of the show that a lot of people like kind of the least.
Really?
6A is probably.
Really? Oh yeah. I'm always surprised by this, I feel.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you were to poll or look at like people's responses, 6A is traditionally the least popular. Like pretty hands down, like not even close, really.
Yeah, I mean, would I say it's my favorite season?
Yeah.
No, I just never think it's bad.
I mean, they're all amazing.
Yeah.
But it's also, that's also something that we could revisit when we're having a discussion about it because the beginning of 6A is amongst my favorite. Parts.
For me,
the Kevin
it's some
Finnerty
of the most
thing,
memorable
I think,
stuff.
is some of the most memorable. And
maybe we just like
really
that
well
kind of. Maybe other people.
I don't think
like
that's
that.
what people dislike, though. I think it's actually the storyline that's getting set up right now is what turns off a lot of people.
Yeah.
Anyway, just something to think about if you are watching it for the first time. It's it's
I'm just
interesting.
Looking at a list right now of the other episodes in this season, just so I can
do it.
I always like. I don't know. I get.
What do you get?
How should I say? Like, I just forget when I'm in a season. I'm always in love with the season. I sometimes I struggle to see it as a whole. Just looking at a list of episodes.
I mean, there's some
like
we have coming.
Yeah, we have coming up. Like, well, I do like Johnny Cakes.
It's also. I mean, it's a season.
Like Cold Stones is one of my favorite episodes.
Right. There's some great stuff. I mean, but it's also like it's a season with Luxury Lounge, which is like another episode like Christopher that people kind of slammed and do slam as kind of like one of the weaker, less successful.
See, I do understand that, and we talked about this when we talked about Christopher. Like, I used to be on that train. I used to really like be like, that's a strange episode.
Right.
And I've come to enjoy them a lot more. So I'm excited actually to see that this time around.
Yeah, totally.
Because I've actually come to kind of appreciate those. I mean, I feel like that's like pretty brave to go out there and like...
Especially with not that much time left in the series.
Anyways, well, we'll talk about it when we come to it.
Yeah, it's not going to be that long.
But I don't know. I do feel like there are some things on my viewing this time that have really shifted and maybe like made me appreciate other episodes that I didn't appreciate as much before.
Yeah.
So maybe it's the same with seasons. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, definitely. This is an amazing episode though. I think actually
it's also a memorable one. Like the wedding, like the Sacrimoni wedding is a really memorable. Just like I mean, his acting like in that scene where he gets carted away.
Yeah, it's great.
It's just like the way the whole thing is set up, and part of it's comical. Like it's just so well. It's so well done.
Yeah, totally. It's funny. I think actually the last time I saw this episode, I was in a hotel and it was just on TV, and it came on around that time. And I actually remember seeing it and being like, "Wow, like this is actually like not the finest, not the finest time in Sopranos." And I was like, "Oh yeah, like 6A, like." Yeah, there's some moments that are a little strange, but it didn't feel that way watching it right now within the progression of all the episodes. And I think it maybe has to do with like that thing I was talking about of like almost like flirting with like kind of like soap opera-y melodramatic elements and humor that can kind of come across as a little like cheap. Like it's funny. Like the stuff with Christopher is amazing, or like when they sit down and they're talking to the old relatives, but it isn't maybe as realistic as the rest of the show is. And if you just like jump into it, it can strike you as a little odd. But as we're watching it, it actually is kind of a counterbalance to the first episodes of this season that are so heavy and so abstract that it kind of needs it to pull it back into you know, the world, into reality.
You know what you've made me think of though are people that I really don't like.
Who are they?
People who are like, you're like, have you seen The Sopranos? And then they're like, yeah, I've seen a few episodes.
You hate them. You don't like those people.
Yeah. Well, and like, especially who have seen like random episodes. And you're like, that's...
The fuck?
You haven't seen it then.
Right.
Like... Yes, there are amazing standalone episodes.
I hope there's no listeners right now who've just randomly chosen this episode and then chose this episode of the
podcast. Yeah, I'm sure lots of people are out there.
We're probably safe.
But yeah, I'm like, you haven't seen it. That's like saying you've seen a play, but you've only seen
Act 2.
Act 2. I don't know. Yeah, those people bother me. Yeah. Right. This is a different episode.
Right. Yeah.
I
hear you.
I like it. Okay.
This was fun. Nice to talk about it. One of our shorter episodes, but I think...
Maybe our shortest.
I think there's others. Yeah. We ran out of ideas quickly before.
If you like this podcast, then email us and...
We like talking to you.
Tell us something that you want us to talk about in a future episode.
Yeah, do it. You're running out of time, so email us quick.
Yeah.
Chop, chop.
Yeah.
Or if you're in the future...
Maybe
still
email us.
Yeah, we'll just hang out and talk about Sopranos. It'll be fun.
Get some of our other friends as guest stars.
We're running out of time. We had plans for that, but I don't think it's going to happen. Yeah, just email us. If you're in New York, you can buy us a beer. We'll talk about Sopranos.
We were questioning what we're going to do once we're done this, and maybe we'll just start again.
Right. And at the end, part 2.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, but different.
Probably different.
The beauty of improvisation.
Yeah. Our conversations on this viewing are not the same as our conversations on last viewing.
Absolutely not. And I think
we focused on really different things.
Yeah, and
last
I think
time.
Yeah, if we were to like wait a year or something, it would be fascinating how different it would be, because I think this show just reflects where you are in your life.
I think
and
so
different
too.
things come out.
You'd probably still talk about the colors though.
Maybe not. I've been thinking a lot about colors.
Like colors
no, I'm over it now. I was over it, and then I was into it today. Now I'm over it again.
Alex just did a music project on colors also.
Right.
So maybe he's just over it.
Just over it, yeah. Too much. Anyway.
Okay, that was a long chat.
You guys are great. Thanks for listening.
We like you guys. See you next episode.
See you next time. Bye.